There is a tree that produces fruit within its first year of life. It asks for almost nothing: poor soil, irregular rain, neglect. It survives all of it. It produces hundreds of fruits per season. It contains enzymes that dissolve protein at a molecular level. It has been used as medicine, as food, as preservation, as ritual, for thousands of years across 3 continents. And yet, somehow, it never made it onto the shelves of modern agriculture, not because it failed, but because it could not be controlled. This is Ancient Food Files, a channel built not for entertainment, but for recovery. What you will find here are the stories that did not survive the transition into the modern world, the crops, the knowledge systems, the survival tools that were quietly set aside when profit became the primary measure of worth. Before you continue watching, please check the link I provided in this video's description. That way, you can verify it yourself. If something in these stories feels familiar, like a memory you cannot place, that is not coincidence. That is ancestral knowledge, still circulating, waiting to be recognized. Subscribe if you believe some things are worth remembering, not for growth, for record. Now, let us open the archive. Long before it had a Latin name, it had hundreds of others. The Mayans called it the fruit of angels, not as poetry, as taxonomy, as a description of something that arrived without obvious origin, grew without obvious effort, and gave without obvious limit. In the lowland forests of southern Mexico and Central America, where this fruit is believed to have originated, indigenous communities did not cultivate it in the way that word is now understood. They did not clear fields. They did not irrigate rows. They simply allowed it to exist near them, and it responded. The tree grew at the edges of settlements. It followed human movement. Seeds passed through the body and germinated in disturbed soil. It was, in the most literal sense, a companion species, one that had learned, over millennia, to live alongside people. The Nahuatl-speaking peoples of ancient Mexico documented its medicinal properties not as discovery but as inheritance. Leaves applied to wounds, seeds used to expel parasites, unripe fruit consumed to aid digestion during seasons when clean food was scarce. These were not experiments. These were instructions passed between generations with the same gravity as language itself. What makes this tree biologically unusual is not any single property. It is the combination. It is not a true tree. It has no woody tissue. Its trunk is hollow. It grows faster than almost any other fruit-bearing plant on Earth, reaching full production height within 12 months of germination, and then it produces, continuously, without seasonal pause. In the right conditions, a single tree will yield between 30 and 150 fruits per year, every year, for the duration of its life. The enzyme it produces, papain, is one of the most powerful proteolytic compounds found in nature. It breaks down protein structures with a precision that pharmaceutical laboratories have spent decades attempting to replicate synthetically. It exists in the latex of the unripe fruit, in the skin, in the leaves, in concentrations that vary by season and stress. The tree produces more of it when wounded, a defense mechanism that became, in human hands, a preservation tool. Meat wrapped in its leaves did not rot, not for hours, for days. In a world without refrigeration, that was not a convenience, that was survival. When the Portuguese arrived in the Caribbean in the early 16th century, they found communities that did not experience the seasonal food collapse that defined European agricultural life. The tree was part of the reason. It produced across wet and dry seasons. It required no storage infrastructure. It could not be taxed in the way that grain could be taxed, because it did not sit in a warehouse. It lived. It continued producing. It existed outside the logic of accumulation. Spanish chroniclers recorded it with admiration and a quiet unease. One account from 1526 describes the fruit as something that dissolves in the mouth before it can be fully chewed. Another, from a Franciscan friar traveling through the Yucatan in 1541, notes that the indigenous populations consumed it daily, that it appeared to keep the body free of certain ailments common to European travelers, and that the tree itself seemed to appear wherever people had recently lived, as though following them. During the famines that swept through colonial settlements in the late 1500s, European settlers who had dismissed indigenous foodways returned to this fruit, not with gratitude, with necessity. It kept them alive while their imported crops failed in unfamiliar soil. They ate, and they did not record who had taught them to. It spread, carried by Portuguese traders along the African coast, established in India by the mid-1500s, present in the Philippines, in Malaysia, in the Pacific Islands, In East Africa, each time arriving not as an imported commodity but as a quiet addition to existing food systems. Each culture it entered gave it a name, incorporated it, built practices around it, and then the industrial food system arrived, and the logic changed entirely. The tree was unmanageable. It could not be harvested mechanically with any efficiency. Its fruit bruised in transport. Its lifespan in a warehouse was measured in days, not months. It could not be stored as grain could be stored. It could not be standardized. Individual trees produced fruits of varying size, sweetness, and texture. There was no way to make it uniform, and uniformity was what the new system required. Beyond logistics, it was unownable in the way that mattered. It self-seeded. It spread through human activity and animal passage without permission. A farmer who planted it once would have it indefinitely, passing seeds to neighbors, to the edge of the road, to the margins of other fields. It did not create dependency, and a crop that does not create dependency is, to a system built on dependency, inconvenient. It was not banned. It was simply not chosen, not invested in, not scaled, and slowly, in the countries that adopted industrial agriculture most completely, it receded from the center of the diet to the edge, to the market stall, to the memory of grandmothers. What modern science has confirmed is not new information. It is old information, rewritten in a language the present is willing to accept. Research published across nutritional biochemistry journals in the early 2000s began documenting what indigenous medical traditions had described for centuries. The enzyme papain demonstrated measurable efficacy in protein digestion, in reducing systemic inflammation, in supporting immune response. A 2013 study from the University of Florida documented antimicrobial properties in the seed extract against organisms resistant to conventional treatment. Research from the International Journal of Food Science confirmed antioxidant concentrations in the ripe fruit that exceeded many commercially promoted superfoods at a fraction of the cost. The leaves, long used in West African and Southeast Asian traditional medicine to manage blood glucose and support platelet production, are now being studied in clinical settings for applications in dengue fever recovery and metabolic disorder management. None of this surprised the communities that never stopped using it. It confirmed what they already knew, what they had always known. But knowledge that survives in practice does not always survive in memory. In parts of the Caribbean, in communities shaped by the trauma of slavery and colonial food systems, this fruit carries weight that has nothing to do with nutrition. It was the food of scarcity, the food eaten when nothing else was available, the food that marked the lowest points in a family's history. Generations that escaped poverty did not carry it forward into abundance. They left it behind deliberately, as one leaves behind a tool used in a place they never wish to return to. This is how knowledge disappears, not through destruction, through survival, through the reasonable human desire to move away from pain. And so the tree continued growing at the edge of things, patient, producing, unaware that it had become a symbol of something other than itself. We are entering a period of agricultural fragility that has no modern precedent. Monoculture systems, built on petroleum, on synthetic fertility, on climate stability that no longer exists, are beginning to show the weight of their own contradictions. Soils are depleted, water tables are falling. The crops that feed the largest number of people on Earth are increasingly vulnerable to the very climate conditions their cultivation has helped create. And here, at the edge of that crisis, this tree stands exactly as it always has. It grows in degraded soil. It tolerates drought. It produces within a year. It requires no synthetic input to reach full yield. It provides caloric density, enzymatic support, and micronutrient content in a single fruit. It self-propagates. It asks nothing that the land cannot already give. It was not engineered for the future. It was designed by a longer process than engineering allows, and it has been waiting, quietly, for the present to catch up. There is a particular kind of arrogance in believing that what has been forgotten has been lost. The tree did not disappear. It grew at the margins, at the edge of the road, in the yards of people who remembered without being asked to, in the soil of countries that were never fully absorbed into the industrial system. It persisted, as living things persist, without requiring documentation or permission. What was lost was not the tree. What was lost was the institutional willingness to look at it seriously, to place it at the center, rather than the edge, of how we think about feeding people through what is coming. That willingness is returning, slowly, not with fanfare, with the quiet, almost reluctant acknowledgement that the systems we built are not sufficient, and that some of what we set aside was set aside too quickly. The soil remembers, the seed remembers, They have not been waiting for us to innovate. They have been waiting for us to remember. If this archive matters to you, subscribe, not for the algorithm, for the record, because what is documented survives, and what survives can still be used.